Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Knight. With me today I've got Doug Kirkpatrick, and we're going to be talking about great complexity with great simplicity. And before we go any further, Doug, where can people get hold of you?
So my Twitter handle is Redshifter number 3, numeral 3. That's also my LinkedIn handle. Those are the two best vectors to get a hold of me.
Fantastic. And Doug, you've been talking about great complexity and great simplicity for a long time. We live in very strange, difficult times. Give me an understanding about what you mean by this.
Right. So a very superior businessman, Dee Hock, founded Visa, the credit card company. And he's in his 90s now. He wrote a book on chaotic organizations, balancing the polarity of chaos and organization. And he famously said that complex rules cause simple, stupid behavior, and simple rules allow for complex, intelligent behavior.
Yeah.
So my experience was that I was part of a core team that started a company called Morningstar 31 years ago,
right,
in Northern California. And we were working out of a tiny farmhouse on a dusty canal bank here in Northern California. And we've been brought together by an entrepreneur named Chris Roofer, and his vision was to build a state-of-the-art high-tech food processing facility. And I was part of the core team of about 24 people. I was the financial controller.
Right.
And this was in March of 1990. And one day our founder came into the farmhouse and asked our team if we could have a meeting to discuss governance. How are we going to organize the enterprise? And we said, sure. And so we met with him at night in a construction trailer out on the job site. We sat around in a circle on steel folding chairs, and he passed out a document called the Morningstar Team Principles.
Right.
The principles boiled down to two things. The first principle was that human beings should not use force or coercion against other human beings.
Yeah.
If you think about it, that principle is the foundation of all law. Everywhere in the world, every law against assault and battery, theft and burglary, and kidnapping and murder and all the rest is based on the foundation of non-use of force.
Yep.
The second principle is that people should keep the commitments they make to each other. If you think about that principle, it's also foundational to law. It's the basis of civil and especially contract law, which would mean nothing if parties did not do what they said they were going to do. So we sat around the circle and discussed and debated these ideas for a couple of hours. At the end of the evening, we just kind of looked at each other and said, these principles are self-evident. They make perfect sense. We have no objections to them. And so we adopted them as pretty much the entire governance of the enterprise. And so when we walked out of the trailer, at that moment, we were a self-managed enterprise.
Right.
And so we had a lot of work to do. This was March of 1990. We had hundreds of contractors on the job site, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, constructing, fabricating, pulling wire. We had thousands of acres, thousands of hectares of tomatoes coming up out of the ground up and down the state of California. We had vital equipment arriving on ocean cargo freighters out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean en route from Italy, waiting to go through the Panama Canal. And we had to hire hundreds of people to operate the factory and drive the trucks. So fast forward to July 16th of 1990, we turned on the factory and we produced 90 million pounds. I think that's around 45 million kilograms of industrial tomato concentrate for the world market. And we basically changed the cost structure of our entire industry. And we did it without a single human boss, manager, supervisor, vice president, zero command authority. All we had was work and human beings performing work according to two simple principles: don't use force and keep commitments. And the company went on to grow. So we expanded operations up and down the supply chain toward customers and remote warehouses across North America, and toward the supply in terms of farming and harvesting and transplanting and trucking. And we built another factory and then a third factory. And in the process, we became the largest tomato processor in the world. And I'm pretty sure everyone in North America has eaten our product. It goes into everything in the grocery store, from ketchup to salsa, pizza sauce, spaghetti sauce, barbecue sauce, and thousands of other products. We export worldwide, and we have thousands of employees and nearly $1 billion in sales. And we have never deviated from our core principles. Don't use force, keep commitments. Two very simple principles. And if you think about these principles, they're the most fundamental principles of human interaction. They are to human beings what gravity is to physics. Yes. Imagine a world where everyone abandoned the use of force. We wouldn't need armies or navies or police or locks on our doors. And of course, yep, we know that's not realistic, but that's not really the point. The point is, the closer we get to that ideal state, the more space we open up for human happiness, harmony, and prosperity, and teamwork. And imagine a world where every single person did what they said they were going to do. What an amazing world that would be. Yep. And of course, we understand that's not reality, but again, that's not the point. The point is, the closer we get to that state, the better off we are as human beings. So simplicity, simple principles, managing great complexity in a company of thousands of people. I like to share these ideas because if you start with principle, that's really the starting point from which everything else flows.
So, having worked for a number of organizations which are hierarchical, and matrix organizations where there's a very rigid structure, and in fact, in some cases can be quite command and control. How is it that you're able to run a business which is flexible compared to that sort of way of I don't want to call it the factory system, but basically a hierarchical, in effect, like an army?
Right. Right. Well, answers can be found in many sources, including history, economics, and philosophy. So if we look at the history of traditional organizations, a train wreck in Massachusetts on October 5th of 1841 is one of the origin stories of traditional management. So two locomotives collided on the Western Railway, killed some people, created a scandal, and the company brought in a civil engineer named George Whistler to investigate. And he came up with the world's first business org chart.
Right.
And he borrowed principles from the Prussian military and came up with departments and lines of authority and divisions and titles and org charts and all the rest of it. And I totally empathize with the people of 1841. We're trying to build large industries with communication systems that, compared to today, were vestigial. Yep. At best, Morse code, yep, or Pony Express, and
Telegram.
How do we scale? How do we scale these things? Well, we had org charts from the Prussian military. So, but today we're in a different world. So we're in a world of light speed communication, where resilient, robust, dense networks of people executing on their personal and commercial missions, creating value for customers. We need to start thinking about distributing decisions and decision-making authority. And we need to start thinking about giving people their brains back at work. Yeah. So they're not controlled by a tiny cohort of leaders or ostensible leaders at the top of a pyramid. Pyramids are tombs, literally, in the case of pharaohs, and today they're tombs in terms of that's where ideas, innovations, and creativity go to die in organizations. So time to free people up and let them do their best work as managers of themselves.
There's a saying, isn't there, about the best way to kill an idea is to take it to a meeting or something, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So I'm just trying to get this. So how is it that you were able to get? Well, you got these two guiding principles, but do people ultimately take the roles that they want to take, and leaders become assumed? Because I mean, I've interviewed people before where they say, where they've talked about Gore-Tex, where the people there are the leaders are basically voted, or people, there's not managers, but there are leaders, and people just follow them because they are natural leaders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, leadership is a very interesting subject, and every organization needs leadership, including self-managed organizations like Morningstar. It's just that in a self-managed organization, leadership is natural. Leadership is organic. Leadership springs up from any place at any time. It's not concocted or designated leadership. And we don't vote. It's not about majority rule or voting or democracy. It's about everyone having a voice in matters that affect them, and about innovation and leadership springing up naturally from any place at any time. If you remove command authority, as we did at Morningstar, then that means that has very serious ramifications. It means no one can tell another person what to do. No one can say to another person, stop doing X and start doing Y.
Right.
No one has any authority to walk up to another person and unilaterally fire them. You can make a request of anyone at any time, from trivial request to requesting that someone leave the enterprise. But it's a request, and people do have a professional obligation to respond to requests. It's not okay to ignore a request, but people are free to say no because it's respectful of free will. You know, people do have free will. Yep. You and I chose to be here together on this call today, freely. Nobody forced us to be here. We chose to be here, exercising free will. So respecting free will, removing command authority, means that leadership has to be natural. We think natural leadership is stronger, better leadership. We think that command authority causes leadership muscles to atrophy. If I can just tell people what to do with the expectation that my orders will be obeyed, that's not really leadership. No. That's just telling people what to do. Yeah. If I can earn the trust and respect of people through communication and collaboration, respect, that's real leadership, and that's natural leadership. Natural leadership is stronger, better leadership, and that's what emanates from a self-managed enterprise.
Yeah, I've been in situations where people have said to me, "If only I could just tell the people what to do," and it's like, no, that's not how it works. You know, people. Quite often, people don't do something because they actually don't know how to do it, and then that's the leadership, which is about showing them, or delegating, or coaching, or and of course, we all have different views about output in terms of quality of output. Some people have a very high level of view about what the quality is, and some people have a very low view. And again, it's about then having a conversation, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And sometimes people bring up the phenomenon of, well, some people in the workplace like to be told what to do. They just like to show up be told what to do, put in their 40 hours, and then really live their lives on the weekends. And what we find is that dynamic changes when you actually give people decision rights in a self-managed enterprise where they have a certain level of accountability and transparency and clarity around a role. Then they start to become engaged and developing a certain passion around actually doing a good job for their fellow colleagues. And it does change that dynamic.
Yeah, I think you do that because you're used to it, or because you've been told to do it. You know, if you think about the way the work has come about, we used to work from home. I'm not talking about last week. I'm talking about, you know, when we were cobblers and candlestick makers and butchers, we generally worked from home or from a shop. And then what happened was that we were all put in factories. And that's where you say that, you know, kind of our brains were taken away because we were told, this is your job, you pass it on to the next person. And that's gone on for generations.
Yeah, that's been the way we've organized, and many companies still organize that way today. And we sort of assume that's the way it's always going to be. And in our education systems, for example, support that and actually concretize those.
It does, yes.
Those ideas prior to people graduating and entering the workforce. So it's kind of a self-perpetuating system. But we do see green shoots popping up, even in the education world. So people are starting to recognize, people like Sugata Mitra, who built the schools in the cloud, for example, are starting to recognize that, you know, there are better ways to do things than the way we did them in the 1800s.
Yeah, very true. And I think there's a movement around that change and you know what we're doing is that we're able to redefine work because of startups. I mean, if you think about, you know, like Instagram were bought for, was it $1 billion, and they only had 15 people or something. So we're seeing you don't need to have 100,000, 300,000 people to be a big company. And I think we're also seeing the changes. You know, here we are talking in February 2021, and we're seeing changes taking place because of COVID-19, and we're both sitting at home, not necessarily. Well, we're sitting at home because we want to, but we can't actually go to an office and have this conversation. So that's a big change as well. And I think what's happening with organizations is that if you had 3,000 people, 1,000 people at 3 offices, you now have 3,000 offices because everybody's sitting at home. And you can see my house and I can see your house. And I was on a webinar last week with 1,000 people, and we're having a chat. And my partner comes in with a cup of tea. And so I introduced it to everybody.
Yeah.
And we made a bit of fun of it because kind of we're used to that now.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the change. Sorry, Doug.
No, it's going to be a different world going forward post-COVID. The remote work is here to stay. It may retract a little bit post-pandemic, but our work routines are now in the cloud, and it's never going to go back the way it was.
No, I don't think so. I think that we're now. So I live in London, and it takes me an hour to get somewhere, to get into London to have a meeting, and sometimes you have an hour, go for a meeting for an hour, and then you come back. So that's 3 hours of my day just for an hour meeting. Now I can just sit here and have back-to-back meetings with people. You're in California, I'm in London, and I can do that. And so my speed and my efficiency as work it's actually sped up, and I'm become more efficient. Now we could argue about whether you want to be on Zoom meetings or Teams meetings all day, but the fact of the matter is, you know, I've just done a board presentation to some people in Switzerland. Whereas normally they would have got me to fly out there, and that would have been like 2 days of my life just to go and have a 1 hour presentation and come back again. Speculative about whether I would win the business or not.
Exactly. Yeah, and I'm hearing that the savings in commutes are almost as significant as the savings in commercial real estate
Yes.
post-pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm investing that commute time in doing something. So I've decided I've actually started running, which I couldn't do if I was traveling into London. I wouldn't find the time, because I've tried it before. You don't find the time. Whereas I've got the time, and I'm actually investing it. And that's good for me. And I'm sure other people are doing stuff. I've actually done a meditation course, because I've got the time.
Wonderful.
So you know, there's some horrible things going on in terms of the deaths, but from a workplace perspective, there's a great opportunity for us to invest in something new and have something new for the future.
Exactly. And yet people will have social needs, and they will have a need to get together. So it's about the kind of the artful mix of face-to-face collaboration and heads down work, and then, as you mentioned, personal investing in one's own wellness, mental and physical wellness, etc. So finding that mix for each of us as individuals, that's going to be an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, and I think that will be one of the things that we've been trying to do, and I don't know if you agree with this, is that we've been trying to take the office work and fit that into a world of Zoom and working from home. And gradually, I think what will happen is that we're going to find a different way, that there will be an opportunity to go in office. I don't know what that will be, but everybody I talk to who work in the future of works, all of the discussions I've had is that they're saying it's only just beginning.
Right.
I don't know what you think to that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, beginning stages, and we'll have to be really thoughtful about the upsides and the downsides of this new working from home world. So we have to be really careful that we don't develop political biases toward those who actually show up in an office versus those who choose to work from home, etc., particularly for women, minorities, people that might not have other opportunities as much as others.
Yeah, I mean, I have a guy who works for me, and this is not, you know, his wife is working. She works upstairs, and he's homeschooling the kids because at the moment we're in lockdown, and therefore he's only working part time. And as businesses, we need to make sure that we're giving people that space, and we shouldn't be expecting those then, if they're homeschooling the kids, to have to go in the office.
Exactly. To be careful about our expectations.
It's another form of discrimination. You know, there's lots of forms of discrimination, and that is it's another one that's coming out.
Exactly.
Doug, it's been fantastic talking to you. Our 20 minutes is up. I think we could go on longer, because I think that the changes that are taking place and the speculation around the changes that are going to take place is fascinating, and I really appreciate you coming on and talking today. Brian, I don't know if you've got any questions at all. You haven't asked any questions during the conversation. If you haven't got any questions, please stick them in the chat quickly. But otherwise, Doug, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been fantastic.
My pleasure, Tim. Great to meet you in person.
Yeah. Well, it kind of feels like, I don't know. It feels like in person now, anyway. So we've been doing it so often, yeah. And thank you, Doug, for your publicity this week and of it, and thank you so much for your insight.
I appreciate it. Thanks for your questions. Take care, Tim.
Thank you. Thanks, Doug.